Hello, Shiver Seekers. Are you ready to follow us into the unknown? I'm Cynthia.
And I'm Stephanie. You have found the Dark Oak. On today's episode, we dive into part 2 of the first crime mystery of the social media age, the case of Maura Murray.
Welcome to the Dark Oak, the mystery podcast with purpose. Each month through our charity called the Branch of Hope Foundation, we give a portion of earnings from our Patreon and sponsors to a nonprofit organization related to the first episode of the month. To find out how you can be a part of the movement, head over to thedarkoak.com or stay with us until the end of this episode and we will give you all of the details.
Thank you. I think I heard a little bit of a herald back to your sultry, sick voice somewhere mixed in there.
She's still hanging around, you know?
Don't you feel like those coughs just linger forever?
That's always the worst part, is how long it takes to just, sound normal again. It's not so much the sound of my voice, but the cough. The cough could really, I'm over it.
You could do without it.
I could do without it at this point. It's only been 5 weeks maybe? I don't even know. I don't even know what day it is, to be honest. So,
Well, we're getting into summer. That means supposedly we're supposed to shed all those germs. The sunshine's just supposed to melt everything away, right?
that's what I hear. But quite frankly, I'm pretty sure my immune system is nothing's getting through right now. I've been through the ringer.
Get some of that emergency on board.
No, nothing's getting through here. I'm good for a while.
Well, I'm so glad, Shiver Seekers, that you're back. I know we ended on the saddest note ever in part 1 of Maura Murray's case, where she just, was a young person going through it, right?
My heart really goes out to her because I think we've all had these times in our life where we're just, trying to figure out who we are, what we need, what we want. And I feel like that's where Maura was. It's just so sad to know that's where she was in her life.
And at the end of the episode, after we had stopped recording, you and I were kind of hashing out some of the things that were shared. And I will tell you, a lot of part 1 would kind of indicate that her disappearance was something that was possibly planned or something that happened because of her mental health. I will tell you, part 2 is going to make you forget all that and start thinking about all the other things that could have come into play during Maura's disappearance. And as I've said in part 1, I will repeat it here in part 2. All these pieces and parts we've collected through listening to Media Pressure, which is Maura Murray's older sister, Julie's. Wow, that was a long sentence, but it's Julie's podcast. And in it, she shares all these little tidbits of things that could be important to finding out what happened to Maura, or it could mean absolutely nothing. And that's a trend that's going to continue in part 2 as well. So while it does show, again, as we said, a young person kind of going through it, I'm not convinced that anything we've talked about up to that point even has anything to do with her disappearance.
Which, when you break it down, and I know you're going to tell us so much more, is actually really frustrating because it just leaves you grasping at straws, quite frankly.
Yes.
We have no idea. We could go down any of these avenues and we may be, chasing a wild goose. Is that right?
A wild goose chase.
See, the cold medicine?
We have chased a wild animal.
I knew where my brain was going, but as I said the words, I was like, is this meaning what I think it means? Wow. Thank you, Sudafed.
Again, I'm so honored. I hope that's not too strong of a word, but I genuinely feel honored to be able to share Maura's case. And the reason I even feel apt enough to share it is because Julie has shared so many things that her family has discovered. And my goal is to obviously try to spread the word about the facts in Maura's case so that we can hopefully find out where she is and bring her home. And also to point people to Julie's podcast, Media Pressure. There is a lot of interviews and you can get it really from the horse's mouth, so to speak, from her family. It's a 9-part series, and I think Julie just handles it beautifully, and it is clear through so many of their interviews and so many of the memories of Maura that they've shared, that they were a very tight-knit family. And, her family is really hurting with Maura missing and want to bring her home. And if we can play even a small part in that, that is absolutely our goal.
Absolutely. Well,
So, to summarize kind of the tail end of last week's episode, Maura had been involved in an accident in her father Fred's car. And while she wasn't hurt and wasn't ticketed, she was really distraught about the damage to her father's car. And she was really wearing it. I mean, it was weighing heavy on her that she had disrupted Fred's life. And again, she was struggling with disordered eating and kind of finding her place. And just a lot of heavy stuff. And we also know that even before the car wreck, she had had this strange reaction to the party at her friend's dorm. And then even before that, several days earlier, she had had an emotional breakdown, which we're not sure what had triggered that either. So at this point, it's kind of just a bunch of unanswered questions that are leading us up to Maura's final day. So you remember on Saturday was the car shopping. Then Saturday night was the accident. Sunday was trying to get the rental car for Fred. He dropped her off at the dorm. He had talked to her on Sunday night, told her that she was to go to the Massachusetts Department of Motor Vehicles to get the incident report to follow up with the insurance company. And then Fred would speak to her later that day. Like
right.
on Monday.
Right.
Like Fred would talk to her on Monday about how they would kind of facilitate all of that. So Monday morning around 3 a.m., Maura submitted her homework on her computer. And this was not unusual for Maura. She was a night owl. This didn't raise any red flags for anyone. However, her sister Julie uses this as a data point to indicate that Maura wasn't planning to disappear. I mean, if she was, would you go to the effort of submitting a homework assignment at 3 a.m.?
Good point. I would think the only reason might be if I had the foresight to want to throw people off. Like, I'm going to disappear, but I don't want them to know that I'm planning this. So,
I want to buy myself some time, you mean?
Right. Yeah. Like, I want them to not know that I did this on my own. So let me do something that's going to throw them off.
Okay.
That's the only reason, though.
Okay. I mean, and that's valid. Nobody else is really sure either.
Right.
Now, next, Maura searches for directions to both Burlington, Vermont and Bartlett, New Hampshire. These locations are not close to each other. They're separated by about 135 miles and a 2.5-hour drive. We're not sure why she was looking to directions to either, but whatever it was, they seemed like they would be separate trips if she were to plan to go to both of these places. Now, she had visited Bartlett, New Hampshire on countless occasions with her family, but had only visited Burlington, Vermont a few times. Again, her family has no idea why she would be traveling to either of these locations on this Monday.
To their knowledge, she didn't know anybody there or anything. Okay.
No. Now, after her internet searches, it's assumed that Maura went to sleep because it's kind of a quiet time. And then at 12:55 in the afternoon, she called a motel in Burlington, Vermont. The call lasted 3 minutes, but she did not make a reservation. Now, listen to this weird detail. 9 months after Maura's disappearance, the Murray family went to the hotel, this hotel that she had called where she had this 3-minute conversation, and they asked the hotel owner what she had been able to remember about the call and what she had shared with the police, because they wanted to kind of see if they could put pieces together. They were informed that she had never even been contacted by the police and didn't even know this young girl had been missing.
And so also, first of all, that's super bizarre and not very good investigative work. But
No.
also, without that, nothing really cements in her mind to remember this conversation.
Which is exactly what happened. So 9 months later, this 3-minute phone call with this girl, she's like, well, yeah, I mean, I'm sure I talked to her. But at that point, she wasn't able to remember anything to offer any assistance.
Right. Yeah. How would you? You wouldn't.
No. And so, I mean, it would have been valuable, like Was she planning on staying a certain number of nights? Was it her and another person? Did she sound upset when she was on the phone? Any of these things, right? Now, around 1 p.m., Maura emailed her boyfriend, Bill, telling him she got his calls, but she wasn't in the mood to speak to anyone on the phone. She confirmed that everything was fine and that she would call him later that day. Around 1:15, she called a fellow nursing student named Aaron to arrange to drop off some clothes she had borrowed. The call lasted for only 2 minutes, and Aaron told her, "It's no big deal, just drop them off anytime. I'm home all afternoon." Then Maura emails her professors telling them there is a death in her family and she won't be attending classes as she needed some time off. Now, we know this is a lie, and her sister believes this was simply a convenient excuse that students use whenever they want to play hooky. And I mean, I guess it does make sense. I mean, what professor is going to come back and ask her proof or confirmation? I don't know that I remember people doing this when I was in school, but maybe it is something that people use on occasion. So anyway, Julie didn't seem all that concerned by this. I think it's strange.
Well, what it does tell us, no matter what excuse she gave, it tells us that she was planning on not going to class for a period of time.
Absolutely.
And then you put that with her returning items to a friend.
Yeah. So you do wonder, like, is she putting things in place?
Right.
You know? Now, at 2:05 p.m., she called an information line looking for information on a Vermont ski resort. The call only lasted a minute, but she didn't book any reservations. Between 2:14 and 2:24, Maura and Bill played phone tag, either missing calls or leaving voicemails. And Julie kind of wondered if it was possible Maura was avoiding Bill's calls. I mean, she did say she wasn't feeling up to talking, right?
Mm-hmm.
About 3 p.m., Maura left the clothes at her friend Aaron's house, and she wound up leaving them outside Aaron's door. As it turned out, Aaron had been taking a nap, and she didn't hear Maura knocking, and so she missed Maura. And Aaron would later say it was like a huge regret of hers that she wasn't woken up, because she could have at least been able to figure out like Maura's state of mind.
Sure. Was she crying? Was she not? Was she saying, "Hey, I'm heading to Vermont for
Exactly.
Right.
And she may have said nothing, but just to kind of figure out like her demeanor would have possibly indicated what Maura was planning.
Well, and just to see her friend again,
Right.
knowing that would have been the last time.
Right. At 3:15, Maura takes out $280 at an ATM, leaving just shy of $20 in her account. In the bank footage, Maura was alone with her hair in her usual bun. She was wearing jeans, a white jacket, black shoes, and a silver necklace. And according to Julie, she had a somber look on her face. And an interesting fact about this footage, it was withheld from the Murray family for over a decade, which is not customary in missing persons cases. So,
That's weird.
why?
By the police? The police
Yes.
withheld it? Did they ever give a reason?
No.
Did they withhold other pieces of information?
They have withheld almost everything.
Okay, so maybe that's just what they're planning. For whatever reason, they're just withholding everything. But that's weird. Why, if they can't give a reason? I mean, I do understand some open cases, they like to keep things close to the chest, but
You'll find as we go through this, the police department has not been cooperative in sharing information with anyone, including the Murray family, who at this point, I mean, 20 years after their daughter's disappearance, are trying to do their own diligence.
I can understand not wanting to release information, like guilty knowledge and things of that nature. But again, we're talking, 20 years later now. We could probably release a little bit more
Yeah,
safely.
maybe. But, Julie said, how much it meant to her to see the footage, like some of the last videos of, her sister. And, unfortunately, it didn't reveal anything. But then it's like, well, what could it have revealed even 10 years prior? Why was that kept secret?
Right. That's interesting.
Now, next, Maura goes to her liquor store. She purchases $40 worth of alcohol. She bought the ingredients for her favorite drink, a Black Russian. Kahlua, vodka, and a bit of Irish cream. She also bought some malt beverage. We know she purchased this on her way out of town because the receipt was found in her abandoned car. Now, there's a bit of discussion about the alcohol found in her car. And in my opinion, there's a bit more discussion than there should be. So the idea is that this is a lot of alcohol for one person, right? I mean, you have a bottle of Irish cream, a bottle of vodka, you have the Kahlua, you have the malt beverage. And again, she had that box of wine that was in the car as well. So yeah, I mean, I see that it's a lot of alcohol. At the same time, if really her goal was to just make a Black Russian, it's not like you can buy tiny bottles.
Right,
You
right.
know what I'm saying? So it made sense for her to buy the larger bottles, not that she was planning on consuming them all.
I mean, right. You're exactly right. You can't really buy single serve Black Russian
Right.
ingredients.
Right.
I will say that if you were planning on heading out of town and you have $280 to spend 40 of it on liquor, that's kind of a big chunk of that money.
Okay, that's fair.
That leaves you $240 left for hotel or whatever else you're planning on doing. That's what I was actually thinking more
Totally fair.
about the chunk of money she spent.
Yeah, that's a good perspective. Now, while she was at the liquor store, she also recycled 79 cans. Now, 79 cans. Why would you do this? First of all, if you're planning to disappear, would it be important for you to go and recycle a bunch of cans? But I was thinking, what if they were cans she didn't want anyone else to find? Like, what if she had been binging on beer or something like that? I don't know.
Oh, okay. Did she get money for them?
She did. I mean, and it wound up being, those were like 5 cents a can or something like that.
Okay.
So it was pocket change,
Okay.
essentially, that she got back for them.
Because I can see doing it if you, again, were maybe headed out of town and you wanted some cash.
Well, that's certainly the case. I
But
mean, whatever, if it was $5 or $10, it's still 5 or 10 more bucks than you had before.
Right. I can also see recycling them, because it's good for the environment if she was one of those people. But yeah, it's interesting that you would, yeah, that's just interesting.
It's interesting. It could mean nothing. And again, her sister seems to think this is confirmation that she wasn't planning on disappearing. Like, why would you go through all these, these little nuanced things that aren't necessary?
Right. Why would you gather the cans, 79 cans?
Why would you spend time doing that if you were just planning to commit suicide or run away or whatever it was?
Very valid question.
Now, also remember the accident paperwork that she needed to pick up for her father that they were going to talk about that night? Well, she had it in her car.
So
when
she picked it
disappeared.
up.
Yeah. So she went to the Department of Motor Vehicles before she disappeared. So she went there at some point during the day. Now, that to me does seem strange if you were planning to disappear. Why would you go through the effort of going to a DMV?
I do think there is a difference between disappearing and, say, committing suicide. So, like, if I were going to commit suicide, would I recycle my cans and grab $10? No. If I were going to disappear and wanted the cash, would I recycle cans so I could get an extra $5 or $10? Maybe. So, but she just got the paperwork, right? And it was left behind. So it wasn't like, because if I were disappearing, I might want a license.
Yeah, but remember, she had 2 sets of paperwork. One was to reinstate her license. The other one was the accident paperwork.
So this was
to help her dad with the insurance.
And she had both.
She had both in the car.
So the license, she may have wanted to get a license, possibly.
Or she picked it up weeks earlier and
Right.
just literally it just sat there in her
Right.
back seat, like,
But exactly.
Yeah.
But for her to go that very day and get the accident report, if she had no intention of giving it to her dad.
Right.
Okay, I see.
I find that one more compelling.
I'm with you on that.
Now, knowing how upset she was about the accident itself, though, it does make me wonder, could picking up that paperwork have actually triggered something, though?
Again, good, valid point. Yeah, absolutely. Why not? Why couldn't it?
Like realizing, like, ugh, my dad is having to go through this ridiculous situation because of a scenario I created.
Okay, I can see that. Yeah.
Now, at 4:37 p.m., Maura checks her voicemail for the last time. This was the last time she would ever use her phone. We are also assuming this is when she left the University of Massachusetts campus in the car that she was forbidden to drive. Remember the beaten up Saturn? It's the only one she
Mhm.
had. So she went to that far lot and got in this car that she should not have been driving.
And this is the car that the alcohol was found in, the paperwork's
Yes.
found in. This is all okay.
Yes. Yes.
So if she did take that car, which I guess we know she did, like she's desperate to go somewhere because she's been forbidden to take this car.
It's clearly not a safe
It's
car.
right. It's not even. It may break down
It
the
may be
road.
right. Yeah, and I mean for two reasons we talked about last time. So either it could break down on the
Mm-hmm.
way and she's driving, as we know, up into the mountains to at least one of these locations, right? So it could break down, or she could be pulled over
Right.
because it's a malfunctioning car
Right. And she does not have a license.
and she does
Still.
not have a license.
Okay.
Right. Because it was suspended.
Right.
Correct.
Right.
Yeah. And again, she left campus, but we still don't know where she was going or why.
I'm assuming Vermont because she's made 2 phone calls to that location. So I'm assuming that's at least where she's kind of thinking about going. But again, it would have been really nice to know, like, was she looking, did she give dates? Hey, for these potential dates? Or do you happen to be near this place? Maybe is her ultimate goal as to where she's trying to go? Like, it would have been really great if these people had been interviewed.
Yeah. All I mirror all the frustrations that you have. Now, the next time anyone heard from Maura, she is in Woodville, New Hampshire, 154 miles north of the University of Massachusetts, and about 2.5 hours away. So she's driven 2.5 hours away from campus, and she's now in New Hampshire. At 7:27 p.m., a woman named Faith Westman in her home heard a loud thud and looked outside her kitchen window to find a dark sedan off the side of the road in the eastbound lane facing westbound on Route 112. And it was a particularly dark and frigid night with temperatures in the low 20s. So this is not ideal for anyone to be out in. And this part of the road was very windy, and actually in front of the Westman's home was a particularly like gnarly curve. It was one of those like hairpin turn kind of things. And so it often gave motorists trouble. So they were pretty familiar with hearing the thud, calling the police. And so Faith Westman did just that. She called in and she reported the accident. And this accident, though, according to her and anyone else that saw it, did think it was a little unusual. The way the car was positioned in the road after the accident was a little unusual.
The wrong way, facing the wrong direction.
Facing the wrong direction. Exactly. Like, so how did that happen? Now, when Faith Westman called into the dispatcher, she reported that she could see a man smoking a cigarette, but she couldn't tell if there were any injuries. Now, again, she didn't go out to investigate. She's looking from her kitchen window.
Do we know how far away it is? Because I'm assuming in the 20s, you're wearing a coat, you're wearing a hoodie, you're wearing all that stuff. And you know what I mean? You might be able to, it might be difficult to say if that's a man or a woman under all those layers.
I think that's very fair. I think that's very fair. I don't exactly know how far. I mean, I know it was, a good distance. She had a clear vision, like a clear line of sight.
Right.
But I think it was maybe 20 yards, something like that, is what I think in my mind.
So you could easily confuse a bundled up man for a bundled up woman or vice versa.
Sure. And again, she doesn't think this is going to be anything that needs to be investigated. She's just like, yeah, I see a guy smoking a cigarette. I don't know if anybody's injured. Just send a dispatcher. You know what I'm saying? Like send a police officer.
Mm-hmm.
Just a few minutes later, Faith Westman's neighbor, Butch Atwood, pulled up to the accident in his school bus. He was returning from taking students on a field trip to a nearby ski resort. And when he stopped the bus, it was positioned between the Westman's home and the dark sedan. So she's on the opposite side of the road. He stopped on the road. So it kind of blocking Faith Westman's view of the accident. And according to Butch, he opened the door to speak to the driver of the car. He says the driver was a young woman who was shaken up but seemed uninjured. He offered to let her warm up at his home just a few minutes up the road, but she refused. He then offered to call the police for her, but she said she had already called AAA roadside assistance. He accepted her statement and says he drove forward towards his home. but he knew her story about having called assistance was a lie because there is absolutely no cell phone service in this area.
Okay, I was going to ask, did her cell phone, in fact, and make a phone call out? And I'm assuming it did not.
No.
But I can see her saying that, because if some man pulled up beside me and said, do you want to come back to my house? That would be terrifying.
Yeah.
And I wouldn't want them to think I was just sitting here trapped alone. So I might absolutely say, no, somebody's on their way. They know I'm here. So I can see lying to somebody to get them to leave you alone.
At the same time, if you're wrecked on the side of the road and it's 20 degrees outside, aren't you going to want to get some help?
Yes, but I don't know that
You would reveal it to him.
this literally takes me to this debate that's going on right now about, would you rather be alone in the woods with a man or a bear? And I'm thinking to myself, would I rather be trapped on the side of the road or alone with a man trapped on the side of the road? I don't know. I mean, a lot of it might have to do with like his demeanor. I mean, he's driving a school bus.
Yeah.
That would make me feel a little more comfortable, I think. But, you know, you just never know.
I get everything that you're saying, and I'm not
Mhm.
saying either way is right or wrong. I'm
Mhm.
just saying these strange circumstances.
Sure, sure.
Now, when Butch arrived home, he called emergency services and he reported the crash, saying it was a dark sedan with a female driver. The airbags were both deployed, but he saw no injuries. And he mentions the wreck to his wife, and then he goes back out to his school bus to complete some paperwork.
Let me ask you this real quick. Did Maura smoke?
No.
Okay. So seeing a man smoking by the car is interesting. Okay.
All interesting. And I'm actually glad you clarified that, because no, she was not a smoker. So
Okay.
to her family, they were like, smoking? There have been some speculation about this, that maybe it was just an interior light of the car or something like that appeared like a lit cigarette.
Okay. I mean, okay.
It isn't, or maybe there was somebody with Maura smoking a cigarette. We don't know.
Or maybe when she was at the liquor store. Well, I guess no, because you would have found the pack of cigarettes or something, unless she took them with her or something. But I was going to say, maybe she picked up a pack of cigarettes. Maybe she was a social smoker.
Maybe she was a social smoker. They did find a cellophane sleeve of some kind in her car that could have been either from a pack of gum or a pack of cigarettes.
Okay.
However, Maura was not known to smoke, and they did not find any cigarettes in the car.
Okay.
At 7:43, police dispatch called back Butch Atwood, to try to get some more information about the driver and what was going on at the scene. And all the Atwoods were able to say is that the car was still there, but they didn't know the location of the girl, because they said, you know, where's the driver? And they said, we're not sure. We can see the car there, but we're not sure where she is.
So at this point, they'd learned that the driver was a female, a woman.
Well, okay, so let me get to this next part
Okay.
here. So we have, so far, the only thing that's happened, we have a call from Faith Westman, who has said there's an accident. It's a man smoking a cigarette. And that was at 7:27 p.m. We then have the phone call from Butch, and we're not exactly sure the time of that phone call, but if he got a call back at 7:43, it had to have been before that.
Okay,
correct?
so we're talking within 20 minutes, these two calls.
Within 20 minutes, these two calls.
Okay.
Exactly. But again, Faith said that she watched the accident for a little while before Butch had arrived. So maybe 10 minutes or so.
And let me ask one more time. This is a one-car accident. Do we know what she actually hit? Or did she just get turned around? Or did she just run off the road? Or
that's up for debate.
Okay.
There was a snowbank.
Okay.
It did appear her car was in a snowbank.
Okay.
There is a thought that she could have hit a tree. However, the damage to her car is not necessarily completely conducive with having hit a tree. So honestly, we're not sure.
So literally everything about this case is unknown.
Unknown, which should not be this hard, right?
Yeah.
It shouldn't be this hard, which does make you wonder, like, who's covering this up? Like, what's happening right now?
Right. We can't even figure out what caused this car to spin out of control, because that's what I'm imagining. I'm imagining the car somehow spun out of control if it's facing the wrong direction.
Yeah, and we'll get into some more, like,
Okay.
the, like, placing of the car, but
Okay.
I will tell you, I do not have all the answers. The Murray family doesn't have the answers. We just don't know the answers to some of these things, which makes this so frustrating. So what we're thinking is that the call from Butch into the dispatch was probably somewhere around 7:38, 7:39. So maybe 15 minutes after, well, I guess more like 10 minutes after Faith's call had come in. Now, Butch is an interesting character. He has raised some suspicion over the years. I, I know. I mean, he drives a school bus. He's got to be. He's got to be a good guy, right?
We just covered Geneva Adams with the school bus driver, man.
I know. It made me think of that. I'm like, I've been lured into this false sense of security with school bus drivers, I think.
It feels like it would be a safe person because you would think this person's been vetted and they're around children, I assume. But, okay.
Okay. And again, I'm going to say this. This may mean nothing. It may mean something.
Okay.
So Butch's version of the story has changed a lot every time he's interviewed. Sometimes when he tells the story, he's in his bus and the driver of the car is standing next to the car. Sometimes he's out of the bus shining a flashlight into the car and the driver is standing in a snowbank. Sometimes they're both in the car, but he has a flashlight and she gets out of the car. Like, what?
Those are big changes.
Yes.
Those are big changes. Does anybody ever ask him why he has 3 different versions of what happened?
Oh, I just remembered incorrectly. I misspoke.
Okay.
I mean, nothing of any significance.
Okay.
But it is unusual.
There's a big difference between staying in my bus and yelling out the window, "Hey, are you okay?" and being in the car with a flashlight.
Right. And like at one point he said he was like talking to her over her hood. Like that's a big difference between pulling up to someone who's in the car, sitting in the driver's seat, and you open your door to talk to them.
Sure.
Like I don't see how you could misremember that. Maybe he's just prone to embellishment and he wanted to seem more involved in the case than he really was.
You know, it could literally be as innocent, if we'll use that word, as that. But yeah, it is strange.
Right. Here's another strange detail about Butch Atwood. According to everything we know, he was the only witness to her crash that spoke to her. And again, by her, I'm saying we believe this person to be Maura, right?
Makes sense that it would have been.
Now, again, he was the only one to actually see her. He claims that she appeared to be sober, but police have consistently said a witness said she was intoxicated. So, who told them she was intoxicated? And
could it have been the woman from a distance, like on the phone, saying they're wobbling around or we don't know. We don't know.
She never said, but she didn't say that.
Okay. So
they're recorded calls.
Oh, okay. So she
did not say that.
Okay. So somewhere there's some phantom witness saying this person's intoxicated, but Butch is saying,
I think she was not intoxicated. I mean, his story about where they were positionally has changed, but he has always remained that she did not seem intoxicated. She was not inebriated. And the police have consistently said, well, a witness told us she was intoxicated. Now, when the police were pressed by the Murray family about who said she was intoxicated, they have never been able to produce an answer.
I wonder if just something in their report, like, I wonder if somebody just made a mistake. I mean, it stinks. Like, hello, let's not make mistakes in these investigations, but I wonder if it just somehow got literally typed in wrong or something.
Yeah. Interestingly, Butch also described this woman, who again we believe to be Maura, as having shoulder-length brown hair. Maura always wore her hair up in a bun. So how would Butch known how long her hair was?
What, her hair was brown?
It was light brown.
Okay.
Sure. But again, I don't know if you're looking at someone in the dark through, like, if you're a distance away, but to estimate the length of someone's hair, especially, and not to be harsh, but for a man to estimate the length of a woman's hair.
Well, and that's actually where I was thinking might be the explanation, is because, stereotypically maybe men don't notice these kinds of things. So could her hair have been up in a bun and for whatever reason he remembers it as, shoulder length? Like you just literally just didn't pay attention kind of thing?
It's possible.
But
Just like,
interesting. Oh,
yeah.
so either he misremembered. Was her hair shoulder length? Was it in fact shoulder length? So if it hadn't been in the bun?
It was. It just
That's
seems like a
interesting.
weird detail for him to add at all.
Unless they asked. I've called police before, like saying, hey, I just saw this driver acting strange or whatever. And they will ask me, what color was the car? What make was the car? What did the person look like? What were they wearing? So they could have asked.
That's
so if
totally
they
fair.
asked, it is interesting that he had it right.
It's weird, right?
I wonder if, okay, so my hair's always in a ponytail. Always, 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 unless I'm on a date or that's really it. My hair is performing. Otherwise, my hair is in a ponytail. But if I had a headache, my hair's in a ponytail right now, but if I had a headache, I would take it out and just so I wonder if maybe she just.
Or as a response to the accident. Maybe she got thwomped in the head by
Right.
an airbag or something. I don't know.
Right.
But
it is strange. It is strange just given that her hair was always up that he's describing her as her hair being down.
Yeah.
Unless it wasn't even her. Which is a whole nother possibility.
Oh, wow,
my head is spinning. Okay.
Yeah. Now, another neighbor a bit further east said he saw the car through snow-covered trees. So from his property through the trees, and again, it had been heavy snowfall, so it wasn't a clear view of the car. But he said he remembered seeing reverse lights. And he believed that the lights had moved, indicating that the car had moved.
Okay. Well, I mean, I would want to know more about the timeline because if I
Sure.
crashed my car, I might try to move it and maybe it moved 6 feet.
Right. So I think this is an important thing to note.
Mm-hmm.
Now, here's a really strange situation. There were several people that drove past the incident that night. One was Karen McNamara. Now, she was driving home from work that night Maura disappeared and was passed by a particular SUV twice, like going quickly past her, in addition to seeing the SUV at the accident scene. Now, does that sound strange?
I'm confused. Can you say that again? My brain needs to catch up.
That's okay. So she was heading home from work.
Okay.
And she sees police lights behind her.
Okay.
And she is passed by an SUV, a police SUV, going quickly to something.
Okay, a police SUV.
A police SUV.
Okay.
Heading somewhere.
Mm-hmm.
She keeps driving. And then that same SUV passes her again. Also going quickly past her.
So at some point she caught up to the SUV?
We'll go into that. I just want to note how strange this is. So already...
Okay, that is very strange because it seems impossible.
Because it seems impossible. I'll tell you,
okay.
It is possible.
I want to make sure I'm understanding.
You are understanding.
Okay.
And because it was so strange, she noticed that the number on this police SUV is 001.
Okay, because I was going to ask... How does she know it was the same police SUV?
She noted the numbers, and because it had gone past her, she's like, oh, wow, that's kind of weird.
Uh-huh.
But then it passed her again,
okay,
which seems strange. And then when she approached the accident, she saw that same SUV next to this dark sedan on the side of the road. And she describes them as parked nose to nose. So the police SUV 001 is up against this dark sedan that's pulled off on the side of the road.
Okay.
Okay, you got that, right?
I do.
She said for a moment, because it was so weird, she thought about stopping to offer some kind of help to this driver on the side of the road. But one, remember, there's no cell service in the area.
Okay.
So even if she stops, there's nothing that she can really do. Number two, the police were already there. Right? There's already a police cruiser there. And number three, it didn't even look like there was any damage. Like, it didn't look like there was, like, a big wreck or anything like that.
Mm-hmm.
There was no debris on the ground or anything. So she's thinking, well, maybe it's just somebody who needed some car assistance or something like that, right? Ran out of gas, had, car trouble, basically.
And she probably wouldn't have thought anything about it had the SUV not driven by her twice.
I think you're absolutely right.
Okay, that's just weird.
It's just weird, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And She also noted that she didn't remember seeing any people. She didn't see any
Oh,
people
she
out.
didn't see the officer.
She
She
didn't see the
didn't see
officer,
the driver.
no Maura. And she also, on her way out, like, past Butch's house, she didn't see Butch. Like, she didn't see anybody. Like, no people.
That's weird.
Maybe? I mean,
Well, to
or...
drive up to an accident scene where there is a police officer and a wrecked car, you're out in the middle. I'm imagining this is kind of in the middle of nowhere. Maybe it's not, but
Yeah, I mean, it kind of is in the middle of nowhere, but this road is fairly well traveled.
okay. To
Mm.
see nobody, but the police are still like I've seen wrecked cars on the side of the road abandoned, but normally when a police vehicle is there, and I'm assuming this happened within a period of time. I mean, I don't know how much earlier the police SUV had passed her, but like I would assume they were still on scene.
Well, yeah, there was a police car there, for
Right.
sure.
But the driver should have also been there. Like the police, right? Okay,
Well,
is there something I'm missing?
listen to
Okay,
this
all right,
next
tell me
part.
more.
At 7:46 p.m., 10 minutes after Karen passed Maura's car and the police SUV, Cecil Smith, the officer who submitted a report for that evening, arrived at the scene. And supposedly, he was the first one at the scene.
Oh. Who drives SUV 001?
Oh, well, you know what? That seems like it'd be a simple question to answer, doesn't it?
Okay. Seems like it might be an important question to answer.
Seems like it'd be important. Now, I'm going to tell you a little bit more about what happened with Cecil, and then I'll
Okay.
go back to the SUV.
All right, my wheels are spinning, girl.
Yeah. So Cecil Smith arrives at the accident and said when he arrived, the car was closed, locked, and abandoned.
And this is the second, maybe first officer to get there. That's Cecil.
Correct.
Cecil is the officer who gets there. He's the one who reported.
So Karen
having been there.
McNamara is just an eyewitness.
Sure. Cecil gets there.
Cecil gets there.
And according to the reports, this is the first law enforcement officer on scene.
Absolutely. And the car's abandoned.
Okay.
No Maura.
Okay.
No Maura anywhere.
And this is how many minutes after the phone call?
So the first 911 phone call came in from Faith Westman at 7:27.
So we're still within less than 30 minutes.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. That's what I thought. I just was like, hold on. A lot's happened in 30 minutes.
A lot has happened in 30 minutes.
Oh, no.
Absolutely.
It is not good. Okay.
Okay. Now, he noted that the driver's side windshield was cracked, both airbags were deployed, and the driver's side bumper and hood were damaged. He also noticed that what he called aspersions of some kind of red liquid were on the driver's side door and ceiling, like in the inside of the car. He had his flashlight. He was like looking in there. And he noted the box of red wine in the back seat.
Okay. Could the red have been the wine?
It absolutely could have been.
Or blood?
No one has ever done any testing.
Oh, no.
No, seriously. We don't know what it is.
We don't know if it's blood. We don't know if it's wine.
Nope. We have no idea what it is. Now, the police have said, well, it was some kind of beverage, like, and kind of alluding to the fact that it was an alcoholic beverage, but we honestly have no idea what this red liquid was.
So alluding to the fact that maybe she was drinking driving while intoxicated.
Yes.
Even if it was red wine, perhaps I guess the car didn't flip or roll or anything, but in a bad enough crash, we're talking a cardboard box here.
Yeah.
It could leak or something. Okay.
Now, what happens next is strange. He walks across the street to the Westmans' home. When they answered the door, he asked, "Where's the girl?" Now, the Westmans had reported it was a man smoking a cigarette. Butch had called in truly only moments before Cecil Smith got to the scene and said it was a woman. But according to my timeline, I don't see how Cecil Smith would have gotten that information. So,
how many minutes was it?
I mean, it is possible that he heard some radio chatter saying it was a girl.
Mm-hmm.
It's absolutely possible. But if you're going to a home where they said they saw a man, are you going to say, "Where's the girl"? When you say where's the driver, where's the person, do you know about the driver? I don't know. It just seems strange.
I would be curious to know because the calls come in, from what I understand, the calls come in and then they're reported and like, the officers are sent out. So like which call are they
Well, the call from Butch.
responding to?
So the call from Butch.
They had to have already been, I think what you're saying is maybe they had to have already been en route to the accident before Butch even called in.
Yeah, so Butch called in at 7:43.
Mm-hmm.
And Cecil Smith arrived at the scene at 7:46.
So 3 minutes later. Okay.
Is it possible that he heard radio chatter of the additional call and that's how he knew it was a woman? Now, again, if he had just run the plates on the car, it would have come back as owned by a 73-year-old Massachusetts man.
Right.
So now some people have said, is it possible that he looked in the car and saw that it was content, like it looked like something by a young woman? But I don't know. That seems a little bit of a stretch to me.
Okay. So I can see this going either way. I can see this part being very suspicious.
Yes.
But I can also see it being like, okay, he's responding to a call about a driver. And then the most recent information he received is that it's a woman. I do believe he would have gone and shown his flashlight into the car if there was anything that appeared to be, belonging to a woman. I can see where he might just show up and be like, "Hey, where's the girl?" I can see that.
Okay, and again, could mean nothing, could mean something.
But I can also see if none of that, what I just described, actually happened. How did he know it was a woman?
How did he know it was a woman?
When the call he was actually responding to initially was for a man.
And don't you also think that's a strange way to put that? Where's the girl?
I do think that's a strange way. Is this a small town?
Yes.
Are these good old boys?
Yes.
So there you go.
Yeah. All right.
I mean, does that make it okay? No, but like literally that's what I'm picturing in my mind. Where's the girl?
Yeah. Well, that's how it went down. So the Westmans didn't have much more to add.
Mm-hmm.
So next, Cecil Smith went over to the Atwoods' home. And Butch, at the time, said, I don't know where the driver is, but he offered to help the police search. Several other officers also came to the scene, and they did a bit of a cursory search. Strangely, though, everyone involved in the search that night, both police, personnel, and volunteers, only searched to the west. No one searched to the east, the direction the car was, like, actually headed. So, like, no one thought to go the other way. It's a little strange, right?
No, that's a lot strange. Were there footprints or something that caused them to look a certain direction?
None.
No footprints at all?
None.
Was it snowing and maybe they came down and they were lost?
It was like 2 feet of snow. There were no footprints.
Because there would be major footprints in 2 feet of snow, but if it's continuing to snow.
It was not snowing that night, but it had snowed earlier.
Where were the footprints then? There should have been, right? 2 feet of snow. You're walking through 2 feet of snow. You leave no prints. I mean, I know we're in Florida, but I have walked in snow before.
There were no footprints that were unaccounted for. I mean, of course, there were footprints from like Cecil Smith and, EMS that arrived and things. But
so oh my gosh, she's in 001.
Well, maybe.
There's no footprints leading away. Oh, no. Okay. Don't come for me, 001.
I'm saying it's weird. Okay, so here we go. Moving on. Cynthia rolls her eyes.
I didn't truly. I think I mentioned in the first episode. Like I knew like the basics of this case, but this isn't one that I've like really dove into. I know you don't think dove is a word, but dived into.
Divered.
Pretty sure dove is a word.
Yes.
But this is not one that I've really looked into, and I'm telling you, I was not expecting it to take this turn.
And remember at the end of part 1 where you're like, oh, this poor girl. And I'm like, oh, wait, in part 2, I'm going to tell you so much that you're going to forget part 1 even happened.
Yeah, like part 1, I'm thinking, okay, she was in a bad place. And not that she necessarily committed suicide, but something based on her state of mind, something happened. And now I'm thinking she's in 001. Who is 001?
Well, we'll try to get there. I'm
Oh,
actually not
no.
even going to promise you I can
Okay.
plug all the pieces in there.
Okay.
So anyway, they search for her, but they only search to the west.
Okay.
No one bothered to search in the other direction, which makes zero sense to me.
I would love to know their reasoning, but
No idea. Officer Smith also takes pictures of the scene. So he took pictures of Maura's car, he took pictures of the damage, he took pictures of the inside of the car. Again, from the outside looking in, right? Because supposedly the car is locked
Sure.
and abandoned. And also another strange twist. These photos were not shared with the Murray family for more than 15 years after her disappearance, and no one knows why.
We do know that they've not shared a lot of stuff that doesn't really make sense for them not to share.
That's correct, but this
But-
seems strange.
Well, it's because she's in 001 and they're trying to cover it up.
But don't you think if they were really trying to find her, why wouldn't they have at least shown it to the family and say, do you recognize anything? Is anything weird? Like, you know what I'm saying? I don't know.
No, and I can only imagine how frustrating that would be for that poor family. I mean, like, you can't even tell us what's going on. You can't even let us see what you found. I mean, what a helpless feeling that must be.
At 7:54 p.m., a be on the lookout was issued for a 5'7" female. How did they know that's how tall she was?
How did they know that?
How did they know that?
Butch?
Maybe.
But
Could he estimate her height?
Was she exactly 5'7"?
Yeah.
I mean, okay, I don't know. Can you estimate heights? I mean, I would say you're 5'8".
And again, at this point, they have not even talked to anyone that knows Maura.
I mean, some people could probably estimate heights if they were standing talking to them. It's kind of crazy that he got it exactly.
Kind of crazy. Again, could mean nothing. Law enforcement has never been able to say how they got that information, that they just knew how tall she was.
They've never been able to say that. Say how they got it.
No. Mm-mm.
See, that's weird. So I will say some of this, what if none of this is nefarious? What if they are really, really horrible at their jobs?
They could be.
What if they're just really terrible at the documentation and the reporting and all of that?
They could be. I'm telling you, this could mean nothing. It's just inept police work.
Right.
I mean, that absolutely could be the case.
Wow.
So EMS workers arrived at the scene and they stayed for only 6 minutes. Which, okay. Now, while they were there, they noted several oddities about the scene. For one, there was an old rag stuck in the exhaust pipe of the Saturn. They also noted the location of the Saturn, and they noted that there were tire impressions both entering and exiting the ditch next to Maura's car. It seemed like Maura had been able to extract the car from the ditch and then pulled onto the side of the road. And it shows the car was, number one, drivable.
Okay. Oh, wow. It was drivable?
It was drivable.
So she could have drove away?
Yes.
She wasn't stuck.
No.
This whole time I'm thinking she was stuck.
She was not stuck. She was on the side of the road. Because remember, even Karen McNamara, when she went by, she said the car just looked like it was pulled off on the side of the road.
I just assumed after the accident and the fact that she was there saying she called AAA.
No.
Which we know she didn't, but still.
She was able to reverse out of the ditch. And remember the neighbor that said he saw reverse lights and he thought he saw the car move? So it confirms what he saw. So she was able to get herself out of the ditch and pulled onto the side of the road.
But to go one step beyond that, the car was drivable. She could have then drove the car away.
Absolutely.
Wow.
Now, the windshield was cracked.
Sure.
The airbags were deployed.
Oh, okay.
You know what I mean? So it would
So
not
you
have
wouldn't
been
necessarily drive a car.
Could you have? I mean, if you had the choice of getting into a weird school bus with a dude or driving yourself to the next town, you know what I'm saying? Like, we're talking about kind of desperate times here.
Right. You're on the side of the road, kind of in the middle of nowhere, in deep snow. It's cold. It's rural.
So would you have at least tried? Maybe. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. I mean, yeah. Okay. All right. Wow.
Not ideal, but the car was drivable.
She wasn't completely stuck.
Correct. At 7:57, the fire department arrives. Now, searches were conducted in the immediate area, a little bit further, like into the woods.
But still not east?
Still not east.
Okay.
And they did not notice any unaccounted for footprints in the snow. I just want to reiterate that. They
Which
didn't find any footprints.
I think that right there tells us she didn't get up and walk away. I mean, I haven't seen photographs, so I guess maybe it's possible if the snow was already, like, trampled down or ice or something like that, like, where you wouldn't leave footprints, but I think it's reasonable that you're walking through 2 feet of snow, you're leaving some kind of trail.
The reason I keep stressing it so much too is that for quite a while, the police theory about what happened to Maura was that she was suicidal. And after her accident, she walked into the snow, succumbed to the elements.
I mean, is it possible? I guess. But can you think of a weirder way to kill yourself, quite frankly?
It's
Really?
the pieces don't seem to fit for me.
I mean, you'd crash the car into a tree before you do that. Like, why slowly freeze to death?
That's the theory.
You would need some footprints for that.
You'd need some footprints for that. So I'm just saying.
And then wouldn't they eventually, my friends, the snow melts and you're left with a frozen body, which would have been preserved because it's been frozen.
But no body has ever been found.
Right. No. No.
Okay. All right. Cynthia has already dismissed.
I'm getting
this
hot.
Theory.
I feel like episode 1, we're getting 2 different versions of Cynthia here. Episode 1, I was just like, oh my gosh, this poor girl. Episode 2, now I'm like, no, hold on.
We need to get some justice for Maura
That's
up in
right.
here.
Wow.
Now, the police department stayed for about an hour and then they left. Then something else strange.
Of course
happened.
it did. Of course.
Maura's car needed to be towed because, again, it's just a car sitting on the side of the road. It needed to be towed. But instead of the police calling Dick McKean of Northland Towing, which is the tow company they had on call that night, like they have a couple rotations, tow companies in rotation. Instead of calling Dick McKean, for some reason, Mike Lavoie, who they also had contract work with, was called. He was not on call that night. Maybe it was just an accident. But we know there was an issue because Dick McKean happened to hear the dispatch call over his receiver and showed up at the accident scene as well to basically, like, get hot with the police officers that, hey, tonight's my work. Why are you, like, stepping on my toes kind of thing? Why are you giving my work to someone else?
Okay.
Now, this could, again, mean nothing, or it could mean something. When Mike Lavoie came to collect Maura's car, again, he was not the one on call, he towed Maura's car to his own personal lot at his home.
Is that the lot he would have normally towed a vehicle to? I'm assuming by the look on your face, no.
Well, at his personal lot, not a police lot.
Okay.
You see what I'm saying? Okay. So that's kind of a big no-no.
Because it should have gone to a police lot. Okay.
It should have gone.
Okay, I see what you're saying.
You know what I'm saying? It's not just
a car that was parked in a bad place that it shouldn't have been and got towed.
Right. And whatever. I guess at this point they're just saying, oh, it's an abandoned vehicle, but it was an accident scene just like an hour before. Yeah, okay.
So inappropriate at the very least.
It's inappropriate. And again, maybe this means nothing. Maybe they're just inept.
Right.
Maybe they're just goons. I don't know.
Was that a choice he made on his own, or is that what he was directed to do?
We don't know.
Okay. Of course we don't.
We don't know. We just know that her car was taken to his personal home.
Okay. Okay.
The part that makes it a little bit more weird, if you will, is that Dick McKean revealed to the Murray family that earlier that day, he had towed a police car, a police SUV, out of a snowbank between 4:30 and 5:30 p.m., and he had it in his logbook. It turned out the Haverhill police chief, who was driving SUV 001, was driving impaired and had driven into a snowbank. So I do wonder, did they not call the tow truck driver that had hauled out the police chief earlier that day on purpose? Or was it just an accident?
A few things here. First of all, the police chief's driving impaired, gets in an accident, and has to have his SUV.
Oh, yeah, I just, glazed
I
past
mean,
that.
and this just happens to be the same SUV that's seen later. I hope you have some more information for me, because I have some more questions.
I have some, not
Okay.
much.
Now, what would be the reasoning you think for calling a different tow truck? Just because he has something on them now, kind of thing, or
I
what?
don't know. I mean,
You
and
just find it
maybe
bizarre that
I
they both happen the
do.
same day.
I find it's a little strange. And I find maybe the mix up in calls, maybe, and again, we're not actually even sure who called the tow truck driver.
Okay.
We're not sure if it was Cecil Smith. We're not sure if it was actual dispatch at the station. We're not sure who, maybe it was EMS. We're not sure who called. So maybe whoever called literally didn't even know who was on the rotation and just said, just
Right.
call a tow
This is my
company.
buddy. This is I have a working relationship with this person.
Exactly. So maybe it was just a total innocuous, like a nothing.
Right.
But it's interesting that McKean has been involved in this now. I mean, he basically inserted himself in it because he showed up at the site and was like, why aren't you letting me tow this car? But then he also has this relationship where he's towed this SUV, which we know is somehow involved in this case.
It clicked. It just clicked for me. Maybe. Okay. I wasn't picking up on it. And now I'm like, he's already been around this vehicle. But wait a minute. At this point, by the time the tow truck gets there, 001 is no longer there, right?
Oh, that's right.
Oh, man. I have no. Okay. Can you please tell me who's driving 001? Because is it still the police chief? Or is he home sleeping it off?
We have never been able to get a straight answer as to who was driving 001. It's a spoiler alert. I'll go ahead and tell you. We don't know who was driving 001. I'll get to it more towards the end about the possibilities of who was driving 001. But honestly, this is so frustrating. The police have never been able to say who was driving the car.
Or did they not want to?
Well,
and again, just to confirm, just to make sure, by the time the phone call, the woman driving, I cannot remember her name, who saw 001 pass her twice and then saw at the accident scene, this would have been after the chief of police would have been impaired. This is 3 hours later in the day.
That's correct.
Okay. Oh my gosh. Okay.
It's a lot of moving pieces to this case.
Wow. I just, I just feel so badly for the Murray family.
Oh, no kidding.
Because, I mean, I cannot, where do they even begin?
Where do they begin? Well, they make a 9-piece podcast and hope somebody comes forward with answers.
Gosh, okay.
Yeah. Okay. I do want to explain more about Karen McNamara's sighting where the car passed her twice.
Okay.
Supposedly, Cecil Smith was driving 001. SUV 001. According to other police reports, Cecil Smith, who was again the first on the scene, the one that submitted the report that night, the one that said, "Where's the girl?" the one that took the pictures that never got shared, he was the one that was driving SUV 001. When he was asked, how could you have passed a motorist twice headed to the accident scene, he claims that he took a, quote, shortcut. So he passed Karen McNamara and then veered off to take this windy, steep road. And then he had to turn off to this other road in order to avoid some snow drifts, which then reconnected to the same road as Karen McNamara. And then he sped forward and passed her again.
Possible. It doesn't sound like a shortcut.
Why would he do that? Now, you could certainly say maybe he was not familiar with some of these back roads. However, his mother lived right around the corner from one of the intersections. So it's
I can see.
unusual.
I mean, but it is possible. It is possible that he just went a different way. It obviously wasn't a shortcut because, first of all, he came out behind the car he was following, or the car he passed. So not
Correct.
a shortcut, buddy.
It was not a
Took you
shortcut.
longer, but okay.
So that explains question mark how she was passed twice
Yes.
by the same SUV.
But weren't the timelines different? Isn't the time that he reported arriving there different than the time she said she saw somebody there? Or no, did I just create that in my mind?
No. So Karen McNamara, if you believe her eyewitness statement, she passed the accident scene where she saw the dark sedan, as she described it, the dark sedan pulled up to the side of the road with police SUV 001 parked nose to nose with her car. 10 minutes later, Cecil Smith allegedly arrived at the scene.
Okay. So, okay. So could Karen have gotten her timeline wrong?
Sure.
I would want to know, like, what did she look at the clock? Because I couldn't tell you. I could estimate what time it is right now, but could I be off by 10 minutes? Absolutely. When I'm, you know what I mean? So, like,
she claims she knew a more precise timeline because she would always contact her family at certain points in her drive home because of the lack of cell reception. So there were certain places on the road that she would contact her family and say, hey, I'm going into this pass where you're not going to be able to get me. And then she would call them again when she was on the other side. So she's saying, based on those phone calls, she was able to estimate what time things occurred.
And by the time she saw this car was parked, but there was no officer. She didn't see anybody.
She did not see anyone, which again could mean something, could mean nothing.
I guess he could have still been in his vehicle. Maura could have still been in her vehicle. I mean,
maybe he was doing
but even still, you can normally see when somebody's in a vehicle.
And also, remember, you said he was in his vehicle, Maura's in her vehicle. Remember when Cecil Smith arrived, he said Maura wasn't there.
Was not there. Right. So he could have been in his vehicle and Maura's not there. And she just didn't see anybody.
Right.
And it's dark at this point.
It's getting dark, yeah.
Getting dark. Okay. All right. Or, so either her timeline is off or his timeline is off, which his timeline better be correct. I mean, he's writing report. His should be well documented, as a lot of things should have been well documented in this case that obviously weren't. So am I surprised? I don't know. Okay. All right.
So that leads us to 9:30. So I feel like we lived an entire lifetime in like this reporting of what's happened over like the last 2.5 hours.
Wow.
Yeah. So at 9:30, Cecil Smith clears the call. Okay. And that is pretty much where I'm going to leave you for part 2.
Wow. This case has so much information. Like, wow.
It's very information heavy and it's just a lot. There are just so many weird things.
So many weird things. Like, too many weird things.
Yeah.
Like, no one case should have this many weird things. It's just unfair. It feels unfair.
Like, it feels unfair for
this
her
poor family.
Yeah.
Yeah. Wow. Okay. Well, I'm trepidatious about what you're going to tell us next week. I don't have high hopes.
All I know is I feel like you have it in for SUV 001.
Well, so far, I've not seen any evidence to not find 001 incredibly suspicious.
I will say, though, I mean, it's one of those things, as I'm sure you found from listening to part 2 now, it made you kind of forget what you thought you knew in part 1. And I think part 3 might change your mind again.
Okay.
So it's a wild case. And hopefully one, like a version of it that you haven't heard before. Hopefully the more accurate one.
I've definitely heard, as I knew I would, because you're so good at your research. I've definitely heard things I've never heard about this case. As I mentioned, of course, most true crime listeners have heard of this case, but you've definitely really brought this family, like, made them feel more personal. So I'm definitely learning a lot.
And again, I urge people to go to Media Pressure, Julie Murray's podcast, and listen to some of the interviews. There's just no way, even with this 3-parter that I'm throwing at you, there is no way I could get all of it packed in.
Sure.
And especially with interviews and things like that. You'll actually get to hear from Fred. He talks a lot on there about his personal experience and how he feels about Maura, how he feels with interactions with the police department. Her brother is on there. It's, it makes it more personal.
Sure. When it sounds like they're really trying to do good things, that leads us to the good thing we try to do here.
Our good thing.
Our good thing is our Branch of Hope Foundation. And that's where we try to remember that these stories that we tell on this podcast, sure, they provide entertainment and excitement, but we always want to show compassion and respect to the victims and their loved ones and never forget these are real people. And the Branch of Hope Foundation allows us to give back to the community, spread awareness about unsolved cases, and hopefully bring a little comfort and hope to those who need it. So each month we highlight a nonprofit organization related to our first episode of the month. And this month I presented the story of Paulette Tabarafara, a little 4-year-old who was born at 25 weeks gestation. So our Branch of Hope recipient for this month is the Gift of Life 27, which is a Central Florida nonprofit organization that helps provide support for families who are affected by premature birth. And they've done so much good, and they've brought so much hope and encouragement to families who really need it at a time that they really need it. So we wanted to highlight them and give back to them. We are simply a podcast leading through words and actions. And if you loved this episode, if you love us, or you love what we're doing here at the Branch of Hope Foundation, please like and subscribe and tell someone, and forward this episode to a friend who might like it. You can send us an email at thedarkoakpodcast@gmail.com. We're open to your questions, your comments, and anything else you want to share. And for other ways to connect, hop over to thedarkoak.com.
Absolutely. And I know you're coming back for part 3.
How could we not? I'm on a cliffhanger here.
Now, part 3, we're going to talk about when the Murray family finally gets kind of boots on the ground in New Hampshire and what they were able to do, the research they were able to do, and kind of some other scenarios of things that could have happened to Maura. And then we'll talk about kind of what the Murray family is doing next, kind of like what their next steps are in this process. But it's really kind of been an honor to cover their story, and I really hope that this is going to do some good.
Me too. Absolutely. Well, don't miss it, listeners.
All right.
We'll see you next week.
Thanks, Shiver Seekers.
Bye.
Bye.
This episode of The Dark Oak was created, researched, written, recorded, hosted, edited, published, and marketed by Cynthia and Stephanie of Just Us Gals Productions, and made possible by you, our shiver-seeking listener. Special thanks goes to Justice Himes for our incredible artwork and Ryan Creep for our amazing music.